A missing designer handbag has just sparked one of Meghan Markle's biggest crises so far. In February 2026, a custom, monogrammed Balenciaga handbag commissioned for Zara Tindall disappeared just days before a major gala. And then, less than a week later, that exact same bag was seen on Meghan Markle's arm in Paris, setting off a quiet but vicious scandal that the palace and fashion world had apparently been monitoring for years. So how does a private, reserved custom piece end up in somebody else's possession? And why did both the palace and Balenciaga react with that cold, measured silence? Stick with us as we break down the sequence of events that allegedly led to Meghan being quietly blacklisted. The handbag that started it all in early February 2026, Zara Tindall was getting ready for the Women in Economic Leadership Gala, a major charity event where she wasn't just showing up, she was essentially co-hosting. And for Zara, this wasn't just another appearance. Over the last couple of years, she's been carefully building an image as the modern royal-adjacent powerhouse, Olympic champion, mother, entrepreneur, married to rugby star Mike Tindall, and someone who's managed to carve out her own lane completely separate from royal chaos. She doesn't even hold a royal title. She actually turned it down. But what she has is arguably worth more: respect. Zara's known as the anti-drama royal. She shows up, does the work, and goes home. No scandals, no leaks, no sources close to feeding tabloids for attention. So for this gala, Zara worked directly with Balenciaga on a custom handbag. And this wasn't some off-the-shelf clutch with initials slapped on afterward. This was a deliberate collaboration, design meetings, material choices, the whole process. A limited edition crocodile embossed cash clutch, hand-finished, with discreet monogramming, the kind of piece meant to signal her fashion evolution and growing influence in elite circles. The bag was completed and kept at Balenciaga's London showroom under Zara's name, with a specific pickup date. Everything was planned, logged, and scheduled. Then, just days before the gala, Zara's team gets a call. The bag is missing. Balenciaga is horrified, apologizing nonstop. A regrettable logistical error. Internal confusion. We're investigating. All that corporate language that sounds concerned, but never really explains what happened. Zara, according to people close to her, was furious, but handled it the way she always does, professionally. She attended the gala with a different accessory, didn't cause a public scene, and everyone moved forward. Except it didn't end there, because about a week later, someone in Balenciaga's Paris office is going through internal photo reports from recent brand events and meetings, and they spot something that makes them pause. There's Meghan Markle, dressed head to toe in Balenciaga, walking into a fashion PR firm's office on the left bank in Paris. And on her arm, Zara's handbag, the exact same one, complete with Zara's monogrammed initials. The image begins circulating internally at Balenciaga. At first, people are confused. Then confusion turns into concern, because Meghan was not supposed to have that bag. She wasn't an official ambassador. Her name wasn't listed on any formal partnership roster. Yes, she'd been around Paris Fashion Week, but so were thousands of others. Going to shows doesn't make you a brand partner. Now Balenciaga has a real issue, a missing custom piece belonging to Zara Tindall, an actual working royal-adjacent public figure with a legitimate business relationship, and that item is somehow in Meghan Markle's possession, the same Meghan who'd been pushing hard for an ambassadorship deal, but didn't officially have one. The fashion house responded fast, and quietly. Negotiations with Meghan, which had already been moving slowly, were immediately put on ice. Basically, the corporate version of, we need to sort something out before we keep talking. And in the fashion world, when a major house freezes talks with you, the message travels fast. So, how did Meghan even get the bag? And what did Zara do once she found out? The investigation nobody spoke about, here's where it gets really interesting, because the way this unfolded shows you exactly how differently these two women handle problems. When Zara learned her custom handbag had shown up on Meghan's arm in Paris, she didn't tweet, didn't leak, and didn't call up William and Kate to complain. Instead, she did something far more effective. She went through proper channels with a paper trail. Zara's private secretary contacted Balenciaga directly with a formal but polite inquiry. Basically, we reserved a specific item. It went missing from your showroom. It has now appeared publicly in someone else's possession. We'd like to know how that happened. And Balenciaga, realizing they were sitting on a serious mess, started digging. Because here's the thing, high-end fashion houses document everything. Every custom piece, who it's assigned to, where it's stored, who collects it, who signs for it. Everything is tracked. So when Zara's team asked how a reserved item ended up where it never should have been, Balenciaga couldn't just shrug and say, mistakes happen. They had to trace the chain of custody. What Balenciaga uncovered next, according to internal sources who later leaked fragments of the story, was that the bag had been signed out of the London showroom by someone claiming ties to a potential brand partnership. The pickup happened during an especially hectic stretch. The individual presented industry credentials that appeared legitimate at first glance, and with Paris Fashion Week chaos in full swing, no one scrutinized it as closely as they should have. But here's where it gets complicated. When Balenciaga's legal department began assembling a detailed timeline of Meghan's interactions with the brand, a pattern emerged that made executives uneasy. There were items from photo shoots that were supposed to be returned, but weren't. Pieces borrowed for personal appearances without formal clearance. Product requests that came through unofficial back channels. Nothing outright illegal, but definitely not how authentic luxury partnerships are structured. Then there was Meghan's Paris appearance itself. She had been posting content implying she attended as an official guest of Balenciaga, personally invited by creative director Demna Gvasalia. But when the brand's internal PR team double-checked their records, her name was nowhere to be found. She wasn't on any approved guest list, not registered as a VIP, not confirmed for any sanctioned brand event. She had essentially shown up dressed in their pieces, carried their bags, including Zara's custom clutch, and projected the image of an official relationship that, on paper, did not exist. And fashion houses despise that. Their entire model relies on tight control over branding and carefully curated ambassadors. When someone positions themselves as affiliated without authorization, it muddies the waters and undermines carefully built partnerships. So Balenciaga responded the way any strategic luxury house would. Quietly, they paused all discussions with Meghan and began creating distance. Meanwhile, Zara said absolutely nothing. Publicly, she remained silent, and that silence may have been the most cutting response of all. It signaled she didn't even consider the situation worthy of public acknowledgement. But Meghan didn't seem to read the room. Instead, she did what she often does. She attempted to seize control of the narrative. And this time, it backfired. The flex that flopped, with Balenciaga freezing negotiations and whispers circulating within fashion circles, the logical move might have been to step back, perhaps issue a discreet clarification through legal channels and repair trust privately. That's not what happened. Within 24 hours of the internal freeze, Meghan's team released a sleek teaser video promoting a new venture titled Love with Meghan. The production quality was undeniably high, polished, cinematic, expensive, carefully curated Paris footage, mood board visuals, close-ups of luxury details, including the handbag. Yes, the same one monogrammed with Zara's initials, which Meghan apparently still had. Palace insiders described the timing as deliberate, too precise to be accidental. Zara had just appeared prominently at a royal event. Meghan drops glossy content reinforcing her fashion relevance. Zara's bag goes missing. Meghan suddenly showcases luxury accessories in a promotional rollout. One fashion publicist described it bluntly. It looked like a flex, an attempt to signal she could still command elite attention. But here's what Meghan may not have anticipated. The fashion world is small, and it talks. Executives, PR directors, creative heads, they're constantly communicating behind the scenes. As word of the Balenciaga situation spread, her standing took a noticeable hit. The relaunch video that was meant to mark a powerful comeback ended up circulating through industry group chats with messages like, "Is she serious?" And the boldness was almost staggering. While she projected high fashion influence, the very brands she was attempting to align with were actively stepping away. Then it escalated. Reportedly, Meghan's team had contacted Balenciaga's creative director, claiming she had been personally invited to Paris Fashion Week. But when journalists sought confirmation from the brand, the reply was icily neutral. Ms. Markle attended Paris Fashion Week. Many people attend Paris Fashion Week. No mention of an invitation. No acknowledgement of partnership. Just a statement so deliberately bland, it practically underscored distance. Meghan pivoted again, posting about misogynistic narratives and institutional sabotage, hinting at some broader conspiracy designed to exclude her from elite circles. She avoided naming Balenciaga outright, likely on legal advice, but the implication was unmistakable. She framed herself as being punished for being too successful, too disruptive, too threatening to the establishment. The issue? The audience wasn't buying it anymore. The strategy felt familiar, one she had been using since 2020, and fatigue had set in. As one royal source, speaking anonymously to preserve professional ties, summarized it: victimhood over accountability, every single time. And while Meghan scrambled to reshape the narrative, Zara Tindall simply carried on. She appeared at the Cartier British Polo Awards in a sharply tailored white Victoria Beckham suit, a subtle show of support for British designers and working royals alike. The images went viral, not because she was chasing virality, but because she looked poised, confident, effortless. Fashion critics praised the look with phrases like modern restraint and aristocratic ease, the kind of composure you can't manufacture. This is what real elegance looks like, and the contrast could not have been sharper. While Meghan was scrambling to post videos and hint at shadowy conspiracies, Zara simply appeared at a single event in a perfectly tailored outfit and reminded everyone why she commands respect in those circles. As one Vogue UK editor reportedly put it, Zara doesn't chase attention. But when Meghan tried to turn the fashion world into a loyalty contest, Zara didn't move an inch, and somehow the world shifted toward her. And speaking of shifts, Princess and had been quietly observing everything, and she was preparing to act. Princess and draws the line by early 2026 after watching the handbag debacle and Meghan's increasingly visible attempts to stay relevant, and decided it was time to respond. And doesn't battle through tabloids. She doesn't leak to sympathetic reporters. She operates differently. She uses the institution itself precisely and effectively, so she never has to say anything publicly at all, according to palace staff present at internal meetings, and initiated what was described as a family-only review examining how royal-adjacent individuals were aligning themselves with commercial brands. Officially, it was framed as routine housekeeping, ensuring protocols around partnerships and public appearances were being properly followed. Unofficially, it was Anne's way of placing every one of Meghan's commercial maneuvers under quiet scrutiny without ever mentioning her name. The review focused on how royal connections, or even the suggestion of them, were being leveraged in negotiations. It examined how fashion pieces were acquired. It analyzed the use of social media to create impressions of official affiliations that in reality did not exist. One longtime palace advisor summed it up perfectly. It's vintage, and you'll never see her react, but you'll feel the room shift. and also quietly reinstated her personal advisory group on public image, something that had been dormant since Queen Elizabeth's passing. Their first task, strategically elevating Zara, Lady Louise Windsor, and Sophie, now Duchess of Edinburgh, as understated ambassadors of the crown. In other words, while Meghan dominated headlines with controversy, the working royals were being carefully repositioned to embody the monarchy's core values: service, dignity, and consistency, behind closed doors, and was reportedly even more direct. Sources present for those conversations claim she made her stance unmistakable. The crown does not duel on social media. The crown does not chase press cycles. The crown endures. The strategy was simple: non-engagement, no official rebuttals, no public defense of Zara, no explanations about the handbag, just silence. Let the theatrics unravel on their own, while the working royals continued their duties uninterrupted. And it worked. While Meghan posted cryptic messages and hinted at unspeakable truths, the royals carried on and fulfilled her engagements. Zara attended her charity commitments. Sophie maintained her patronages. Catherine, after recovering from health challenges, returned to public life with composure and grace. The contrast was stark. One side appeared to be spinning relentlessly to manage a narrative. The other refused to engage, understanding that engagement itself would validate a story not worth legitimizing. But for Meghan, the consequences were only beginning, because once the fashion world began closing ranks, other dominoes started to fall. The blacklisting begins in fashion, reputation travels fast. And when word circulates that someone is difficult or unreliable, it spreads even faster. Once you fall on the wrong side of that current, regaining footing becomes nearly impossible. The Balenciaga freeze was just the first signal. Within weeks, other major houses began creating quiet distance. There were no formal announcements. That's not how this industry operates. Instead, invitations slowly stopped arriving. Calls went unanswered. "We'll circle back" turned into permanent silence. Chanel had reportedly been in preliminary discussions about a sustainability collaboration with Meghan. Those talks ended abruptly, no explanation offered. Shortly after, Chanel partnered with Zara Tindall on an equestrian-inspired capsule collection, complete with a full Vogue editorial spread. There was no dramatic press push, just refined imagery of Zara working with horses while wearing pieces from the line. It felt organic. Dior and Burberry, both of whom had received assertive outreach from Meghan's stylists about potential inclusion in spring 2026 campaigns, opted to pass. A French PR director affiliated with one of those houses reportedly summed up the industry's position bluntly: "She doesn't represent discretion, and discretion is our currency." Meanwhile, Zara's schedule filled effortlessly. She co-hosted the Royal Charity Polo event. She served as equestrian lead for the Commonwealth Youth Games. She appeared in Harper's Bazaar UK's Legacy and Lineage issue. And here's the key detail: she wasn't chasing any of it. No aggressive PR campaigns, no strategic leaks. The opportunities came to her because she embodied something the industry values deeply: authenticity. The disparity became impossible to ignore. Meghan, who had spent years cultivating an image as a fashion authority and influencer, found herself increasingly frozen out. Zara, who had never branded herself as a style icon, who simply wore well-made clothes while doing her job, was suddenly being courted by major houses. And it wasn't confined to fashion. Meghan's Archwell Foundation began facing IRS scrutiny over discrepancies between reported expenditures and tangible outcomes. Tyler Perry, who had previously provided significant personal support, including access to his properties, was said to have quietly stepped back, no longer extending the same assistance. The ripple effects were widening, with Harry reportedly back in the UK for private discussions with the palace legal counsel. Meghan appeared more alone than ever. Without him beside her, the optics shifted, and not in her favor. Her social media activity grew noticeably erratic. One day she'd post polished empowerment quotes and curated mood boards. The next, she'd allude ominously to unspeakable truths she might be forced to reveal. The subtext was no longer subtle. The implication was clear. Private communications could be exposed. Conversations could be revealed. If she didn't get what she wanted, everything could be set on fire. But what she failed to grasp was this: the people she was attempting to intimidate were not easily rattled. They had navigated constitutional crises, the death of monarchs, wars, national scandals, threats about leaked text messages and private exchanges. That wasn't frightening. It was small. As one former Sussex aide reportedly put it, she's always treated exposure like both a weapon and a shield. But this time the room isn't afraid. And while Meghan seemed to spiral, something unexpected was taking shape within the royal family, an alignment that would quietly redefine the narrative. The quiet alliance, as events unfolded, subtle movements were happening behind the scenes. Women from different generations, previously operating in separate lanes, began moving with an unspoken coordination, unified not by formal strategy, but by shared instinct. Lady Louise Windsor, daughter of Prince Edward and known for her low profile, was photographed leaving Zara's London flat the morning after the Paris fashion story broke online. She was dressed simply, discreetly, but for those paying attention, the message was unmistakable. Louise, who shares Zara's preference for privacy and service over spectacle, was signaling solidarity. Then Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, stepped forward. She hosted both Zara and Louise at a private equestrian gathering in Oxfordshire. No press, no photographers, no social media trace. Officially, it was just horses and countryside. Unofficially, palace sources suggested it was about reinforcing stability, what one press officer described as strengthening the narrative from within. Sophie had observed Meghan closely during their brief overlap as working royals. She had formed her own conclusions long ago. When Zara became the target of public drama, Sophie reportedly decided it was time to demonstrate where her loyalty stood. And then there was Catherine, recovering from serious health challenges. She had intentionally remained out of the public eye. Her first major appearance post-treatment came at a London charity gala on February 12, 2026. The dress she chose spoke volumes. A reconstructed ivory gown originally worn by Queen Elizabeth II in 1969, pulled from the royal archives after decades. Its return was not accidental. As one royal fashion historian observed, the gesture signaled continuity, legacy, a reminder of where history stands. Catherine and Zara have never projected overt closeness. Different roles, different generations. But insiders confirm they share deep mutual respect rooted in common values. Catherine prizes discretion. Zara lives it. While Meghan posted veiled warnings and hinted at revelations, Catherine allowed a vintage gown to deliver her message. As one aide noted, quietly, elegance has never required a microphone. There were no formal summits, no coordinated press strategies. The alliance wasn't declared, it was understood, a collective agreement. Meghan's tactics would be met with dignified silence. No engagement, no defense, no explanation, just continued work. And that refusal to participate made confrontation impossible. You cannot sustain a battle if only one side is fighting. By mid-February, the shift in public perception was evident. And yet, Meghan was about to escalate further. Meghan's final gambit, sensing her influence slipping, and recognizing that the royal family would not engage, Meghan chose to intensify matters. In early March 2026, a sealed letter was hand-delivered to a London law firm representing one of the palace's charitable affiliates. The language was measured, but the intent unmistakable. If defamatory inferences toward the Duchess of Sussex persisted, Even through what the letter termed nonverbal optics, she would consider releasing archived digital communications between herself and unnamed senior royals. The palace reaction? Complete indifference. Princess Anne's recommendation was reportedly concise: ignore it. So they did. What Meghan may not have anticipated was how such a threat would land publicly. Even individuals previously sympathetic began questioning whether someone willing to expose private communications could credibly claim moral high ground. Supporters grew uneasy. The tactic felt heavy-handed, and while threats were being issued, Zara's trajectory continued upward. She was offered a limited edition co-hosting role at Royal Ascot-style pavilion, a position that had once been quietly floated for Meghan back in 2020 before circumstances unraveled. The contrast, once again, spoke for itself. The irony was almost unbearable. The very role Meghan had once pursued, and ultimately lost through her own actions, was now being handed to the woman she had tried to sideline. At a Glasgow horse trial, a journalist asked Zara whether she had seen Meghan's latest Instagram post. In it, Meghan wore a replica of one of Zara's Ascot outfits, captioned, "Real class needs no bloodline." Zara's response was flawless. She blinked, paused for a moment, and said calmly, "Some of us ride horses. Some of us ride headlines. I prefer the former." And then she walked away, back to work. Within 24 hours, that quote had been picked up by more than 300 media outlets. It was measured. It was sharp. It landed. And it worked precisely because it wasn't overperformed. Even Princess Anne reportedly raised an approving eyebrow when told about it, which, coming from Anne, is practically a standing ovation. But as Meghan's position continued to weaken, an unexpected development followed, this time in the form of a letter no one anticipated. The letter no one saw coming in a move that stunned insiders. Princess Anne personally wrote to Meghan Markle. The letter was delivered to Montecito through diplomatic channels. Its contents were never released publicly, but palace sources familiar with the briefing described the tone as composed, direct, and rooted in principle. It was neither an attack nor an olive branch. It was something more deliberate, according to those aware of its message, and wrote something to this effect: "Royalty is not secured by blood alone. It is earned in the spaces between headlines, in how one endures, not merely how one speaks." The letter reportedly encouraged Meghan to reconsider her path, to return to public service not as a duchess performing celebrity, but as a woman choosing legacy over leverage. There was no response. And within days, Archwell's difficulties intensified. The IRS inquiry deepened. Questions surrounding grant distributions grew louder. Former employees were subpoenaed. This time, the scrutiny wasn't coming from British tabloids or palace whispers. It was American federal authorities following documented trails. Back in London, precautionary steps continued quietly. Prince William reportedly instructed communications teams to update all Sussex-era protocols, identifying potential reputational risks. Catherine advised her patronages to distance themselves from collaborations connected to Archwell-affiliated initiatives, subtly untangling associations before they could become liabilities. When an aide asked Zara whether she planned to address the Meghan situation directly, her reply reflected classic Windsor restraint. "If you know what you're doing, you don't need to explain what you didn't do." And with that, the chapter seemed to close, not with spectacle, but with silence. What do you think? Did Meghan really take the handbag, or was there something else at play? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. Click on the next video appearing on your screen. You won't want to miss it.